Hi, this is Andrew Digger. I'm so glad you tuned in again to hear another Bible story. Man, I am enjoying these stories. And I don't know about you, but today has been a beautiful, beautiful day. The sun is out and the birds are singing, and I got turtles swimming around in that tank. You can hear it. Listen, you hear those bubbles? That's the tank. I got turtles right here, and they're swimming around, and they're happy because the sun is coming through the window, and the sun makes them very, very happy. Anyway, I'm glad you came to hear another Bible story. You know, we've been looking at stories in the book of Genesis, and we talked about creation, and we talked about how God made a person, and how that person grew up and decided that he and his friend, Eve, decided how they wanted to make their own decisions, which they did. But when they did that, they had to leave the garden. We talked about the story of Cain and Abel, and that was a terrible story, where a boy named Cain killed his brother Abel because, you remember why he did it? Because he was jealous. It shows that sometimes when we're jealous, bad things happen. So, anyway, those are the stories we've talked about so far. And if you remember from last week, we're in the middle of a story, the story of a guy named Noah. Remember him? Yeah, we're going to finish that story today. But before I tell the story, I've got a question for you. Do you know what a promise is? Do you know what a promise is? Okay, a promise is when you say that you're going to either do something or not do something. And when you make a promise to somebody, if you say, I'm going to play with you tomorrow, or I'm going to eat all my Brussels sprouts for dinner, or I'm going to color my face blue, that would be a dumb promise. But if you made that promise, the person to whom you're making the promise would, what? Kind of expect you to do it. Okay. And so we're going to look at a promise today, but it isn't a promise that a person makes to a person. It isn't a promise that Noah makes to God. He kind of made a promise in what we looked at last week. But this is a promise God made to Noah, but not just to Noah, made to all of us. And in fact, not only did he make a promise to us, but he gave us a sign that every time we see, we can remember the promise God made. Okay, and that's going to be the story we're going to look at today, during this episode, and it's kind of the finishing of the Noah story. Okay, so you remember last week we were talking about Noah, and do you remember the situation? Well, bad things were going on in earth, and God was getting really, really irritated, and he founded this guy that was a straight arrow. He was doing exactly what he was supposed to do. We call that righteous. He was being a good guy. He was good to his family and to his neighbors and animals. And in fact, he was good in all ways. He was very good towards God. And God said, I want to save this guy. The rest, everybody else is just a mess. But I am going to save Noah. So do you remember what God told Noah to do? That's right. Told Noah to build a great big boat. And you remember what the boat was called? That's right, an ark. And what was Noah going to put on the ark? All these animals, right? So Noah put all these animals in this great big boat. And why does Noah need a boat? That's right, because God was going to make it rain. And that's what ended up happening. It just started to rain. And it says the springs, you know what a spring is? That's water that's underground. The springs started gushing water, and the rain was coming down, and everything was underwater, which is bad for things like animals. For fish it's good, but animals is bad. So Noah's on this boat, on his ark, and he's floating. And it rains and rains and rains and rains and rains. But Noah and all those animals in Noah's family, they're all safe in this boat, right? Because God is kind of protecting them, because Noah was a good guy, a righteous guy. Okay, so he's on the ark. Now, what do you think that boat was like with all those animals? And we were talking about hundreds and hundreds of animals. What do you think the boat was like? What do you think it sounded like? Moo, oink, 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 oink. Meow. Boy, I bet there were all kinds of sounds going on in that boat. And what do you think it looked like? Man, you had dogs and cats and lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, you had all kinds of things. Animals crammed on that boat. You know, when they were kind of hanging out together, I barked and my little dog just came here. So you got all kinds of animals on the boat. Hey, I want to introduce you to my dog because she just came here. They had animals like this. Her name is Coco Chanel. Say hi, Coco. Hi there. So that's my dog, Coco. She heard me bark and she came running, right? Okay. Anyway, yeah, so, and what do you think it smelled like? Jeez Louise, all those animals. Oh, it was a mess. Okay, so anyway, Noah's on this boat and he's floating. And it rains for 40 days. 40 days. You can hear Coco barking in the background. Okay, it's raining 40 days. And Noah's on there and he's just saying, oh, what am I going to do with all these animals? They're driving me crazy. They're barking. It's real loud and noisy. And so he's on the ark taking care of the animals. Well, it rains for 40 days. And then God causes it stops raining, but there's water. There's still water everywhere. So there's a lot of water all over the place. And the boat's still floating, right? And Noah's looking out at all this water. And he's saying, man, I can't live on this boat forever. So yeah, this giant dog was coming to Noah. I can't live on this boat forever. You know, let me see if maybe things are drying out a little bit. Okay? And so he turns out a bird. And the bird flies around and comes back to the ark. And, you know, Noah asks the bird, hey, bird, is it dry land yet? Can we land? And the bird says, can I get rid of these animals? And the bird says nothing, because the birds don't talk. Bird says, tweet. And Noah knows, no, bird came back. You know, still a lot of water. So a little while later, he sends another bird out. This time he sends a bird called a dove. Have you ever seen a dove? They're really pretty. They coo. When I was growing up, we had a lot of doves where I lived. Anyway, he sends out a dove, and the dove flies around, and Noah's sitting on the edge of the boat, and he's waiting, looking at his watch and wondering, when this bird's going to come back, you know. And after a while, the bird flies around, and it comes back, and Noah notices something in the beak, in a bird's beak. That's like a bird's mouth. And what he sees is this little twig, this little olive twig in its mouth. And Noah says, man, that olive twig must mean something. What do you think it means? If that bird found a little piece of olive plant, what do you think that means? The water's going down. There's some dry land. So the bird could find a little twig. And Noah says, hot dog, all I see is water, but there must be land somewhere. Okay? And so a little while later, Noah sends a bird out again, you know, to find this land. And you know what happens this time? Bird doesn't come back. And you know why it didn't come back? Because it's dry land again. So the bird was eating and building nests and getting worms and all that good stuff. So Noah knows that the flood is just about over. He doesn't have to spend any more time on this boat. He doesn't have to look at all this water. And he doesn't have to smell all those animals and listen to them bark. So Noah waits. Eventually the waters go down and down and down and down and down. And the boat, boom, hits dry ground, which is a good thing. Kind of surprised Noah, surprised all the little dogs on the boat. And Noah says, hot dog, we've hit dry land, now I can get these animals off. So Noah goes down to the bottom of the boat, opens the door, and says, come on, guys, leave. And the animals all start coming out. And what kind of animals are coming out of that ark? You got lions coming out. You got elephants coming out. You got camels coming out. You got dogs and cats, worms squiggling out. You know, snails, they're going out very slowly. All of these animals are coming out of the boat. And when they're all gone, Noah says, hot dog, this is good. I don't have to spend any more time with the animals. Now we can kind of start over. Because Noah's got his family, got all these animals out. We're going to start over. And God has saved and protected us. And we're going to repopulate the earth. Well, remember, God is looking down on all of this. And so God is looking at this and says, you know, before people were running around acting crazy. And they were hurting themselves, and they were hurting their world, and they were hurting the animals, and doing just plain bad stuff. And I really got ticked off, and I wiped it all out and wanted to start over. But you know something? I'm not going to do that anymore. You know, that probably wasn't a good thing to do. Because, you know, sometimes when you get really angry, you do things that seem to make sense when you're mad, but don't make sense later. You know, like if you got a brother or sister and you get mad at him and you hit him, and what happens when you hit your brother or sister? You get in big trouble, right? Right? Or you yell back at your mama or your daddy, and they get upset, right? And that's not good. So God thinks, you know, I don't think I'll do this again. I don't want to destroy everything again. And he says that, he tells Noah, you know, I'm not going to do this anymore. You know, I'm not going to do this anymore. And he says to Noah, in fact, I am going to give you a sign so that when you see it, you know that I have promised, right? I have promised that I'm not going to do this again. I'm not going to destroy the earth. And Noah says, oh, that's good. What kind of sign are you going to give? What can I see that will tell me that you're not going to destroy the world again? And got to be something that everybody can see, though. So it's got to be big. Can't be something little. Got to be big. And God said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put in the sky this kind of bow. Only it's not going to be like just any kind of bow. It's going to have a whole bunch of different colors. And when we look at the sky and see this bow, this thing in the sky with a lot of colors, you know what they call it? They call it a rainbow. And a rainbow has all kinds of colors. What kind of colors you think? Well, man, you got purple, and you got red, and you got green, and you got yellow, and you got blue. It's a lot of colors. It's beautiful. Rainbow. And God says to Noah, and he says, I want you to tell this to your children, and I want them to tell this to their children. Whenever a person looks at a rainbow up in the sky, you know, maybe after it's rained or before it's rained, every time they see a rainbow, I want them to remember that God, I promise that I will never destroy the earth again. Instead, I'm going to protect the earth. Now, Noah, I want you and your kids to take care of the earth too, because we're kind of working together on this. You know, so I don't want you to start running around acting crazy like those other folks were doing. But I promise to never destroy the world again. And you know why I'm not going to do that? Because I love you. Okay, that's the end of the story of Noah and the ark. And it's a story about promise. And you know what about God's promise? He's kept it. He's kept it. The earth has been going on just fine. And I'll tell you, when you see the rainbow, you know that God is going to be there with you. Okay? Now, next week I got another story. It's a story called, that has to do with a building called the Tower of Babel. Tower of Babel, and it's really a good story. So I want you to tune in. So until I talk to you again next week, I want you to remember, and so does Coco. We both want you to remember that you are a child of God and God loves you very much. Goodbye.